implemented all of our old equipment. So I worry when you have technology integrated through this joint operations where you're relying on drones and networked equipment, if that stuff gets hacked, suddenly now you don't even have the capability to execute your mission anymore. So we have to figure out how to spend the money, but also, not try to relearn the lessons that we learned the hard way for having our mil-spec equipment.
Yeah, so we're talking about the plot of my next book. So but it brings to mind, this question of, as we talk about these things and as we write about them, are we giving the bad guys ideas, or can they, if we can think of it, they can think of it? What do you think?
I don't think I ever worry about that.
Yeah, well,
They've proven that they can think of their own stuff. They don't need mine.
yeah, they're extremely opportunistic, as you say, when you
Right.
describe like warlords, and they have the advantage in that they know the territory, they know the country, they know the culture, they know who the heroin, opium dealers are, which brings up another problem when it comes to training, is that is language and culture. This is coming up more and more with the special ops teams. There's
Right.
more intense language training so that you can go into these areas and operate. You can break into a house. You're looking for a terrorist, and you can speak to the people and ask who's who, and so that's another aspect of how complicated this is.
Well, on the positive side, hopefully they're buying everybody's books.
Look at all those downloads in Iran.
I just want to address that question, because Jeff and I have had this discussion too, and it is something that I worry, but I don't know if worry is the right word, but it's something I think about in writing. And I guess the conclusion I came to is, when you bring these vulnerabilities to the surface, and if any of us are lucky enough to sell books like Tom Clancy, I think what it does is it helps penetrate the leadership, the zeitgeist, and the mentality of leadership. So maybe the guys thinking about the budget will think about these vulnerabilities that we have, and maybe we'll get some action, because instead of pretending the problem doesn't exist, they can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah, and speaking of the budget, our national budget, the federal budget is $1.1 trillion. $600 billion of that goes to DOD. And then when you factor in veterans and foreign aid, it's $700 billion. So that's like 70%, if my math is close, of the federal budget goes to that. And so where, how, why, do we get that extra punch that we're talking about? What do you think, Michael?
As far as the extra punch?
Yeah, I mean, you're the one who started this whole conversation.
Well, I'm an operator. I'm not a money guy, but it's tough. The budgets for every service is different. The Air Force is heavily focused on new technology and new aircraft. They want to do more things with less aircraft. And it's like the F-35, for example. The stuff that this thing is supposed to do is amazing. They've had some problems with that, and I'm certainly not an expert on it. But Brian kind of touched on it earlier. We get ourselves so involved into technology, then what happens when we get hacked, or if for some reason we lose our GPS capability? Are we going to be able to fly airplanes like we did the old way?
So, David, it looked like you had something you wanted to comment on there.
I think, money drives a lot of things. My background in the Air Force was financial, both on the base level and weapon system acquisition. And I think that where the money's driving us is the system. The system has some flaws to it. It is inefficient, but inevitably any army has inefficiencies built into it for a reason. You don't keep stockpiles of weapons for no reason. That's expensive. Now, where you get your efficiencies are, or at least this is where, when I was in the service, there was kind of a lot of the blending, like the blending of the efforts, the purple suit operations, we call them, where they're taking away the duplication of effort. We're doing joint fighters now. We're doing these things that are supposed to satisfy the needs of many. But ultimately, I think